Hello everyone, my name is Serafi and I'm happy to meet you all. And today we're going to be talking about the new champion for Path of Champions in Legends of Runeterra. It's been a minute since I made any Legends of Runeterra videos. It's because I got busy in December with my new Wizard 101 project. Not gonna lie, probably also gonna continue because I have finished getting Aurelian Soul to 4 stars, which means monthlies aren't nearly as important to me now. So I am going to continue to make Legends of Runeterra videos, but it'll probably not be like as frequent as it was before because I have other stuff that I'm doing and I just don't have enough time for everything. And this, I do want to keep you guys informed, but as far as gameplay footage, might not be as frequent as it was before. Anyway, Kayle is coming out as the new Path of Champions champion. Kayle is a 5-mana 1/5 with when allies. I have +1/+0 for each time allies have attacked with increased stats. So her stats are really bad. A 1/5 is not good, but she does have the ability to empower herself, and her mechanic is called Empowered. And what Empowered is it gives you an additional benefit if your power is a certain level. We can see that on the screen with this card, Winged Messenger. Can't really. Let me zoom in a little bit. Zooming in does not work on Twitter. Okay. All right. Okay. So Wing Messenger is a 3-mana 2/4 with Empowered 3. Give itself elusive. So as long as Wing Messenger has at least 1 additional power, it has elusive. If its power drops below 3, even in the middle of combat, then it immediately loses the elusive. Like it is literally tied to your power stat. So the focus for Kayle is to try and get power to all of her units. Kayle herself gets quick attack if she has at least 5 power, and then she levels up if you end the turn and she has 11 power. And at 11 power, she has quick attack, and then I believe she has Overwhelm. She has quick attack and Overwhelm, and then her ability is Empowered 16 double attack. So yeah, you just want to keep trying to raise her attack as much as you can. It's quite a chore, but that is how Kayle functions in League of Legends as well. She's really, really powerful, but only in the super late game. And thankfully, Kayle does get some powers that are designed to help her reach the late game in a reasonable amount of time in Path of Champions. For the other cards in her deck, we have Solari Shieldbearer. This is a 2-mana 3/2 with Daybreak grant me +0/+4 this round. So that's interesting. It doesn't give itself power, but that's okay. Getting increased stats is pretty useful, and a 2-mana 3/6 is going to give you some good early game pressure, although this card will not be nearly as good in the later areas. Then we have Gift Giver, 1-mana 1/2. When I'm summoned, create a gem in hand. A gem is a 1-mana spell that heals an ally for 1 and gives it +1/+0 forever. Yeah, it's a pretty good card. You know, it'll allow you to trigger your Fated abilities, which there are multiple Fated cards in this deck. So Gift Giver will be a definite important card for you to play in the early game. Mikhail's Blessing, 3-mana burst spell. Grant an ally +1/+2 and remove all negative keywords from it. That's excellent. So that includes Gloom. If you get hit with like 3 stacks of Gloom, you can remove all of them with Mikhail's Blessing and go back to your normal stats. Obviously, there are some other negative keywords, like, for example, can't block is a negative keyword. I don't know if a mobile counts as a negative keyword. I have never tried to use Mikhail's Blessing on an immobile creature, so that'll be interesting to test. Another negative keyword is Frostbite is a condition. It doesn't apply a keyword. Neither does stunning it. I think it's just gloom and can't block. Oh, ephemeral. And ephemeral. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty decent. Other cards in the deck, we have Shield Vault, 2 mana, slow spell, grant an ally +1/+1 and stun an enemy. That raises the monster's power, which is important, and it also gives you the ability to trigger Faded, and again, it's pretty good. Speaking of Faded, we have 2 Faded cards here. Wounded White Flame, 3 mana, 2/3 dragon with Fury and Faded. Fury, of course, is when the creature kills another creature, it gains +1/+1 permanently. And Faded is when the creature is targeted once per round, it gets +1/+1 in addition to whatever the effect is. So if you play Wounded White Flame and you give it your Shield Vault, it will become a 4/5, which is solid. Then we have Sacrificial Scholar. I've never seen this card before. 2 mana, 1/2 Faded. Last Breath, create in hand copies of the first 3 spells you played on me. Okay, so the deck does not have too many spells in it, but the 2-star power fixes that, so you'll probably be able to get some decent value off of Sacrificial Scholar when she is slain. That's fine. And then lastly, we have Blinded Mystic. When Blinded Mystic is played from the hand, grant an ally +1/+1 and silence an enemy follower. That does trigger Faded. So it's a 4 mana 3/2, and being able to silence an enemy is pretty good. Morgana has this card as well, and Morgana gets Ancient Coin on it. Blinded Mystic is a much better card at 3 mana than it is at 4 mana. If it doesn't get Ancient Coin with Kayle, I don't know how powerful it will be. She doesn't have any cards that are more expensive than this, and that's good. It's good that her deck is so cheap because she's so expensive, but but I have a feeling that they're going to leave Blinded Mystic at 4 since they don't have any more expensive cards in the deck. And I don't think that's going to be particularly good. Alright, let's see. Okay, Star Powers. So, Kayle's rare power is called Shared Blessings. When you give or grant stats to an ally in play, grant a random ally in hand +1/+0. Or, if you don't have any allies in hand, give +1/+0 to the top ally in your deck. Okay, so this is an easy way for you to try and build up as much power as possible. And of course, it can be triggered on Kayle as well. So rather than needing Kayle, so let's say for example, you summon your gem card. Then you play the gem on it. The gem guy gets the +1/+0. Then you give +1/+0 to a card in your hand. That card might be Kayle. So now Kayle is a 2/5. Then you attack, and that triggers Kayle's effect. So Kayle is now a 3/5 off of one card. So basically you're doubling the speed at which Kayle can progress and level up. If you get lucky, or if you basically keep Kayle as the only monster in your hand. Seems fair. Alright, the 2-star is called Divine Intervention. +1 starting mana. At the start of the round, create a Blessing of Targon in hand. If you already have Blessing of Targon, reduce its cost by 1. Blessing of Targon is a 4 mana burst spell that grants an ally +3/+3. Now, there is also a constellation power that has been revealed that gives Blessing of Targon mana potion, which is -1 cost. So at that point, you will be getting 3 cost blessings of Targon every round, and if you already have one, you just reduce the cost of your existing one by 1, so you can try and play it for 2 or 1 or even for free. This seems to be a recurring theme ever since they kind of shuttered their... All the more recent additions to Path of Champions have had this. Ambessa creates a card in her hand at the start of the turn. Warwick creates a card in his hand at the start of the turn. Both of them give -1 cost to it through a constellation. And then for Victor, his Relic creates a card in your hand at the start of every turn. So yeah, They're trying to make games feel more consistent. They're trying to give themselves a base power level and stop the situations where people are complaining that they're getting messed up by RNG. That's what they did with Evelyn's Relic as well. It'll be very important to see how they handle Elise, because Elise is another card that's like really another deck that's really focused on whether you draw Elise herself or not. So we will see how this plays out. 3 mana to give an ally +3/+3 is a very good power, and it is thematic for Kayle to get this ability. It's not particularly exciting, but I think it's necessary. The problem is, of course, that with the Deadly Adventures, we have to have a stat race. And so now they have to put a lot of effort into giving the 6-star characters the ability to win a stat race that they created. So because they printed Aurelian Soul and they printed other characters that are able to generate a lot of stats very quickly, now every character has to have the ability to create stats very quickly. Otherwise, they can't compete with the baseline power of those 6-star nightmares. So you can expect that this is going to be how the game functions from now on. Like, every character, including the late game characters, needs to get as much stats on the board as fast as possible, which is awkward to do because it's a late game character. Shared Blessings 2. When you give or grant stats to an ally in play, grants a random ally in hand the same amount of stats, or the top ally of your deck if there is none. So, now, instead of giving +1/+1, you give the same number of stats. So if you give an ally on the board +3/+3 from your Blessing of Targon, that means that you give an ally in your hand +3/+3 as well. That's really strong. It also makes the 2-drop, the Daybreak card that gives itself +0/+4 a lot better. So as long as you have the 3-star, that card is decent enough. All right, good. Now we get to the 4-star, and the 4-star is where things get really interesting. When you summon an ally, give it +1/+1 this round. You know, that's a good power. I've used it quite a bit. But the thing is, with Shared Blessing, that means that literally every time you summon an ally, you're giving another ally in your hand +1/+1. This is very similar to Bard, but I do think it's going to be a lot faster than Bard. So it will be very interesting to see how much damage you can push. Then we have Mana Flow, of course. And lastly, her 6-star, Day of Judgment. When you play a 5 or more power ally, it deals 3 damage to all enemies. If it is a 10 power champion, it strikes all enemies instead. So if you throw Kayle down, she has 11 power, you literally hit the board for 11. That is very similar to Aurelian Soul's 4-star power, where if you play him, then he will just blow up the entire board. Now, with Aurelian Soul, it casts the spell, so that means that it goes on the stack, and your opponent can respond to it. But this is just a strike. That's really strong, and of course you could hit for more. Usually you will hit for less than 15, because usually you're going to play your Kayle at 10 power. But in situations where, you know, the game has gone on a little bit longer, maybe it's your second copy of Kayle, maybe it's another champion that had more base stats to begin with, you could potentially swing in for 20 or 25. So you could do more damage than Aurelian Soul was doing, which is impressive. So, is Day of Judgment good? Yes, we know Day of Judgment is good, because Day of Judgment is basically just Aurelian Soul's 4-star power, and that power is what keeps Aurelian Soul in the game a lot. Now, obviously, you don't get the ability to double your stats when you play a card, but the rest of the star powers are basically doing that for you. So yes, even though you're not getting any mana discounts, you are getting a huge board and crushing everything. And of course, also, it's very important to note that because it triggers on any ally, not just Aurelion Sola himself, then that does mean that you're going to get a lot more like burn, even if it's just the 3 damage to everything. That can definitely win you a lot of games. Like one of the reasons that I do so well with Fiddlesticks as a 6-star is because it basically means that anytime I play a 3-cost card, I'm giving everything on the board -1/-1. And that is very good for keeping the board cleared and weak. So anytime that I play an ally, I deal 3 to everything. Obviously, you're not reducing power in that instance, but you're killing things a lot faster. So yeah, I think this is going to go really well. And lastly, we have Kayle's Relic. Starfire Spellblade. Power. If I'm Kayle +1 starting mana, I have +1/+0 for each encounter. You've won this adventure. Okay, fair enough. So that means that as long as you've won at least 4 encounters, you can trigger Kayle's 6-star with Kayle herself on turn 1 without triggering anything else. That's pretty decent. The +1 starting mana is also very important because Kayle is bad. I don't know what to tell you. Kayle is a 5 mana 1/5. So playing her as fast as possible is very important. So it's important to note, okay, with the 2-star that gives you 1 mana, and the 5-star that gives you 1 mana, and the Relic that gives you 1 mana, and Luminous Sight, which gives her +0/+3 and Sharp Sight, and then Starforge Gauntlets, which gives +1 mana if you're Titanic. You can actually start the game with 5 mana. Kayle is the first champion that we've seen that can start the game with 5 mana, which means that you can actually play Kayle on turn 1. And since you can actually play Kayle on turn 1 if you use this setup, then it actually does mean that the second ability that gives you just a bunch of extra attack later in the run is very important. So yeah, Kayle does look like she'll be very good. I don't necessarily know how important her Relic is going to be, but she does look like she'll be very strong, and I think that I will probably enjoy playing her. I just like angels, so, you know, of course. So if I have some good games, then I'll upload some. I'll probably upload like just like I did with Victor and Fiddlesticks in December. I'll probably upload like a video of me taking on like maybe Lysandra or whatever the new 6.5 area is, so you guys can see Kayle in action. My name is Serafi, and I was thrilled to have all of you with me.